Um, Here we are having a conversation with Dodge Billingsley again. Thank you, Dodge, as always. Very giving of your time to talk to me here in the UK. It's great. So you're 7 hours ahead of me, 7 hours behind me, aren't you? Yes, right. So
yes.
It's clock here, 1 o'clock in the afternoon for you.
Yeah,
okay, that's good.
Lunchtime here.
Lunchtime. So I can't start without asking you about the elections that you've just gone through and the inauguration and stuff like that. So, it's interesting times that you guys are living over there.
Yeah, this is on the record. Wow. I don't know what I want to say about this, except we got to get our act together. Yeah. We got to get our act together. My friend in the FBI, counterterrorism, he keeps always referring to America like we're the most expensive and well-funded third world country in the world right now.
It's a t-shirt. That's a t-shirt, that is, isn't it?
Yeah, it actually probably is. I probably need to do that. Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of tough here because, frankly, I mean, just by vote count alone, I mean, it's probably a good percentage. Maybe I don't think it's half the country, but there's millions and millions of people who believe the election was fraudulent.
Yeah.
There's a strong sense on the other side that they were worried that there would even be, maybe there'd be some power grab. I think thankfully the institutions were in place that I don't think either of those things occurred. But it's been an interesting 2 months.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at the headlines and almost, if you were to redact the country name and look at those headlines, you could almost guess where they were. I suppose that would fit with your FBI colleagues' assessment of the whole thing, wasn't it? But it just seems so strange that there were headlines with images of places or somewhere that you recognised, that was held up as the democracies. But I guess that the fact that you've got those institutions in place means that they've been tested now, maybe for the first time.
Yeah. And to a large degree, it's our, Department of Defense and the armed forces, because I think they were feeling, from what I can read and what I've heard, and they've kind of felt like they didn't want to get put in the middle. The senior military leadership, but there were kind of requests, from various factions to maybe get involved in this, and that's not the role, but yeah. Anyway, I think we skated through okay. Now half the country will be up in arms because we have a Democratic Party president. That's okay. The other half was up in arms. We had a Republican. I really hope that Congress can get their act together and learn how to, work together again on as many things as they can. I mean, you see all the executive actions that each president has to go through now, the last 3 presidential cycles, and each party rips on the other party's president's, executive actions. Well, they only do that because nothing gets through Congress.
Yeah.
And so, but the executive actions are not good. It's not good governance, because the next president can come in and write executive actions to overrule the previous predecessor's executive actions.
Yeah. So, there's no consensus there, is there, or bipartisanship moving anything forward? I mean, like I said, we've had very, very different from your previous president, but we've had Brexit, and Europe's always been a bit of a thorn in our political system. And that obviously COVID's come along and just made it all worse and exacerbated it even more. It's just, it's just strange times. It's strange times to be talking about conflict repertoire, because some of this stuff, is cyclical, cyclical for those of us that study military history from your war studies days at King's College in London. It's like, certain things, they kind of repeat themselves. There's an element at the moment, I'm reading stuff and it feels more like the Cold War from when I was in the army, in the sort of, the late 80s, early 90s. It's our standoff with Russia and our troops in Estonia as part of NATO's commitment. It just feels very strange. And then you've got all the British forces, 400, not a great number, have arrived in West Africa, because that looks like where IS is starting to shift its focus, the Sahel and stuff, so it's very fluid at the minute. We might not have world wars, but we certainly have some smaller things to worry about.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, the reason we're talking today is about Afghanistan, because obviously 7th of October is the 20th anniversary of Operation Enduring Freedom, when the states led a coalition into Afghanistan, following on from 9/11, obviously only the month before, not less than a month before. So what I want to talk is a little bit about, your memory of that time, and what you did when you first went into Afghanistan, and then maybe reflect a little bit back over those 20 years and talk about some of your current projects that you've got and things that people can follow up with your social media, like your YouTube channel and Instagram, and keep in touch with you, and also the stuff you've got coming up with your Iraq stuff, which will be 2023, won't it? That'll be 20 years from that. So where were you on 9/11, Dodge? This is a question I've never asked you, actually.
Well, it's a fitting question, because 9/11, I was actually on my way to the airport to fly to the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. I was due to give a briefing on a trip I had just recently taken through Western China, through Kashgar province, down into Pakistan. And actually, about 2 weeks before 9/11, that's where I was, on the Pakistani edge of the Wuhan corridor in that northern part of Afghanistan. And just kind of just driving across Western China in the Pamir Mountains, and just sort of getting a look around and see what was going on. It's kind of stuff that I'd like to do. I really liked to do it then when I was a lot younger, and could really handle tough travel.
Yeah.
But
we're talking the back of a truck now and stuff, aren't we? And bus travel. We're not talking the days of the 4x4 or any of that kind of stuff.
No, there probably is great roads out there now, but there was no good road. That last Chinese town, I think it's called Tuskargan. When you leave Tuskargan and you show your passport and all your credentials there, you drive for about another 2 hours to the Pakistan border. And that is one rough road. It just took, I don't know, it's probably not that far, but it took all day. Once you got into Pakistan, believe it or not, the road got a lot better. Now, I think China's changed that since then, although I haven't been back to that part of the world. But so 9/11, yeah, I'm getting ready to go to Fort Leavenworth. I was due to give a briefing on 9/12 the next day. And I got a phone call, like, are you watching the news? And I wasn't. And so I found got to a TV and saw that I did not see the first tower come down. I saw the second tower come down. Obviously, the guys at the other end at Fort Leavenworth said, we're on complete lockdown. So that trip obviously never occurred. So I went and
all those flights were grounded as well, weren't they? Immediately, every flight was grounded and stuff.
All the planes were grounded wherever they were in the air. I think they were sort of reassigned to close airports. And once all those planes that were in the air landed, I think that was it for about 2 weeks. But and almost immediately, I started at least thinking about, I think I need to get over to Afghanistan. I had just, like I say, 2 weeks previous, been standing on that border in the Wuhan corridor there. But I wasn't sure how, in the sense of like for whom. I was a 100% freelancer at the time. And so it's one thing to say you got to go, but it'd be nice. It's hard financially sometimes to just go. Anyway, what was kind of curious was that at the time, I think the Army, the DOD, and news media were reaching out to anybody who had any Central Asian experience. Mm-hmm. And almost within, I would say, a couple of weeks, I was contacted by CBS World Bureau, the World News Bureau out of London. I was a referral from somebody else. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was kind of trying to figure this out. They said, well, you stop by in London and come see us. What are your plans? I said, well, I'm actually going to go to Afghanistan. And they go, oh, that's perfect. That's what we want to talk to you about. And I don't remember all the details, but I remember working with John Paxson at the time, who was he was the bureau chief there in London. And so I said, well, that works good for me, because my plan had been in Uzbekistan on the Afghan-Uzbek border back in 1997. So when I thought of Afghanistan, to me, it was going through Uzbekistan. I know a lot of journalists and other media, documentary types, NGOs chose Pakistan. But those are really your only two places, because Iran wasn't very open to the West. Turkmenistan, of course, was not. Unless you were parked off a ship off the, you still had, that was it. It was Pakistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan. But I had no ties to Tajikistan at all. So I stopped off in London, met with the Uzbek embassy, got a visa there, went and met met John Paxson there at CBS. He suggested I become a stringer for CBS. And I had kind of always known what that was, but I didn't know what that meant. So he basically said, listen, I'm going to give you a satellite phone and $5,000 travel money. And then if you see anything, and I said, well, do you want me to shoot for you? Shoot any images? And I didn't have, I guess, enough of a track record as a shooter, because he politely declined and went, nah, don't worry about that. But if you see anything of interest, call us and we'll get a crew over there. Which I remember thinking, that's kind of in a way, it's a bit of bravado. I mean, could they really get a crew over there like that? I mean, if I'm going, I don't know that, how hard is it to just, I mean, how easy is it to get a full CBS crew? So anyway, I flew to Uzbekistan, and then ended up there with about 100 other journalists who had the same idea. And we were stuck. We didn't know at the time that the U.S. had closed. Well, the U.S. had negotiated with the Karimov government to close that Tormuz border area because we had put up our big base at Karshakhanabad, K2. And that's where the horse soldiers, all the special forces, ODAs came, they were all stationed there. We basically staged everything in the north from K2, and they were flying sorties in and out. They also closed the border. The Friendship Bridge was closed between Uzbekistan and Haraton. And eventually, though, there was a lot of, I think it's about 6 to 8 weeks later. And while I was there, man, we tried everything. We met with drug smugglers that routinely take heroin up through Turkmenistan. Tashkent's a pretty good town, at least in those days. You could meet all kinds of riffraff.
Yeah.
But we just could not figure out a way to get into Afghanistan. And I sort of teamed up with a couple people, a couple other sort of journalists that we became pretty good friends. And eventually we went over together when there was it opened up across we floated from Termez on like a barge. We called it the media barge over to Haraton. And we got there. That was our entrance into Afghanistan. And that was the last weekend in November. So we had sat in Uzbekistan for probably, I want to say 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly. And I got there and I stumbled into, and another journalist had made it there before us, kind of in a discreet way. And we thought he was like, gosh, how did he get over there, Anyway, he met us when we got to Mazar-i-Sharif. And I could hear this gunfire, but I thought, okay, it's Afghanistan, it's a conflict, I don't know, but it seemed like it came from the same place. And he came over and he met myself and my friend Damien, who from French. He was a Frenchman, and he said, "Hey man, there's a battle at this fortress. It just started today. So the next morning, there's a curfew in Mazar-i-Sharif because you had warring factions of the Northern Alliance, like you had General Dostum and his primarily Uzbek army, and you had Ostad Ata, who was a Tajik, and there was Mohakik, who was the Hazara commander. And so there was just as much fear that those three would start tearing the city apart now that the Taliban was gone. But anyway, the next morning we went out to the fortress, and it became the Kala Jungi Fortress Uprising, and I shot some incredible footage that has been used in, I would say, 25 documentaries. The first one we did for Channel 4 in the UK is a co-production. No, never mind. I got a turn. It wasn't a co-production. That was our next film. But I think the first film that came out was House of War, Paul Ewell's film, and but it was pretty remarkable. And that, of course, Kala Jungi, we had our first U.S. KIA, Johnny Michael Spann, the former Marine Corps officer who became a CIA member of the CIA there. And it revealed also the emergence of John Walker Lindh at the very end of that 1 week ordeal. There was a bunch of prisoners were taken out, and lo and behold, we had an American Muslim named John Walker Lindh. And I don't mean to use the term white American, but that was what was so remarkable about it. He wasn't like an Arab American who sort of found his way back to a version of Islam or anything like that. He was a white American from Marin County, California. And there he was. It was John Walker Lindh. And so that was kind of my initial foray into Afghanistan. It was just that last week of November and right during the middle of the Kala Jungi Fortress Uprising.
When you were waiting in Uzbekistan, that 6 to 8 weeks to get across, were you aware of what was going on? Was news kind of feeding back to you? Were you getting it through the mainstream media because it was going on almost like ahead of you, but you couldn't get there, and so you were getting it from the mainstream media? It
was interesting. So Alex Perry from Time Magazine, he was coming out of the India bureau. He was the bureau station chief in Delhi, I think it was. So we we became friends, and there was Damien, and there's a couple other guys, Roddy Scott, and the four of us kind of buddied around together. And collectively, between the four of us, primarily Alex and I think Roddy Scott, we had numbers to people. We had numbers to General Dostum. We also were meeting with Uzbeks, so we didn't just sit around. Every day we were out trying to figure out how while we were in Tashkent. And so we talked to different Uzbek. We talked to General Dostum's guys in the capital, Uzbekistan, because he was very closely connected. He had his own I don't know, just like his own visa issuing consulate of some sort. I mean, it was. We had visas. Afghanistan visas ready to go into the north. So we actually got on the phone about every 2 or 3 days. We just get on the phone and we call. We ended up talking to General Dostum's, some of his sub-commanders, while they were there with the U.S. Special Forces south of Mazar-i-Sharif, working their way back up into take Mazar-i-Sharif and all Balkh province. So we got a smattering of news from that. But the trouble is you couldn't verify anything. You could not verify anything. So you try to listen to 6 people say things around Tashkent because they were like in the know. Because everybody wanted to let you know they were in the know. Dostum, guys in a gray suit and a tie, and they'd all come in. They tell you this is the plan and this is what's going on, and then you get a sense of this. And then every once in a while, something from the special forces, I wouldn't say leaked out, but I think the DoD would release something, because I think after all there was a little bit of pressure to show progress. 9/11 occurred and we promised a retaliation. I don't think many people realize that doesn't mean you just, go to war the next day.
Well, it wasn't an equal size event, was it? I think, you've got 9/11 and all of that imagery. I think, if I was to use the word, a retaliation or a response, you would think something that was equally as impactful or destructive. Right. I think that's what most people would think, isn't it? Not this slow progress over a period of 2 to 3 months of movement and stuff like that. People don't really.
Well, yeah, and that was the thing. I mean, you had the Ranger airdrop down in Kandahar airfield, which was a big news event because they put, DoD combat camera on the plane, and then they, filmed it in the night vision, so it's all green, and you see the parachutes come out. But you know what? They could have done it over North Carolina. You wouldn't have been any more the wiser. But the Rangers did land, and then they gave that up to the Marines. The Marines came in and occupied Kandahar. Special operations were operating out of K2, and then as soon as we grabbed Mazar-i-Sharif, they called it the schoolhouse, I think, if I remember right. And they had a little bit of everybody there, not big numbers, but you had 5th Special Forces group set up a fob. I mean, you had all kinds of other players in the Special Forces community were there. You had
we'll just use that term, shall we? The people that are going to exist in this shadowy world, isn't it? But
yeah, because it was and then what I thought was interesting, there was probably, it wasn't even a platoon level, but maybe it's a half a platoon, maybe it's a squad of 10th Mountain, and they were security force for all these special operators. So they'd show up and they'd just pull the outer security. You'd see, but that was really kind of it. There was not really almost basically no U.S. footprint in Mazar-i-Sharif at the time. I mean, they were there in their little ATVs, but there's teams of 3, teams of 4. When the Taliban prisoners came from Kunduz, when the Kunduz was collapsing and the prisoners came, the ones that they put into the Kalajungi fortress, you saw the footage. By then, the media had also kind of come in. And so it's interesting when you think of that, the coverage of Mazar-i-Sharif and the fall of the North. It was done collectively among so many, like ARD out of Germany Arnhem did a fantastic job documenting and getting lots of material and lots of footage of all kinds of things. We were part of that because we got tremendous footage out of Kalajungi. There was this, I think his name was Alicio out of CNN, out of the Rome Bureau. So it was very collective. And if you put all of it together, it's still probably confusing, but you could have a multi-faceted picture of kind of what was going on in the North there. But again, it was so hard to verify anything. I mean, Dostum's guys would come out of his headquarters in Mazar-i-Sharif. They go, "Oh, we have we're going to read this press release or whatever," and they'd say something. And I remember the funniest one to me, because of all my time in the Caucasus and in Chechnya, and the Guardian reprinted this, and it's still on the web, and it was just completely. I said, "Do not run with the story because it is absolutely not true, based on personal experience." But the story was something like, 50 Chechens throw themselves off a bridge in Kunduz, commit mass suicide rather than being taken by Northern Alliance. And I'm like, okay, 1, there's no Chechens in Kunduz. 2, there's certainly not 50 Chechens in Kunduz. And 3, if there were 50 Chechens in Kunduz, that's a Chechen battalion. They could wreak their own havoc.
Not want to surrendering or going backwards. There'd be no retreat at all.
Yeah, they could get themselves up to Tajikistan or wherever they wanted to be. I mean, it was. but they ran with it, I think, and it went around the world. It was one of the early news stories in that late November, early December. I don't remember the exact day, and I just remember having done so much work in Chechnya. It just wasn't true. But again, there's no way to verify it. So they are on the ground, and I felt really, really bad for media sources who were giving, daily file assignments. Although that's when I did my very first. Mazar-i Sharif was the first place I ever did traditional day-to-day media, because I was stringing for CBS. Now all of a sudden, I called them, but they didn't have a crew there. But I had all kinds of footage, so I started uploading. They looked at it and they said, "You're going to go on every day now, Dan Rather, U.S. 5 o'clock news time." So I calculated the time out, and a Turkish network called NTV had set up a satellite link up on the roof of where we were kind of crashing in Mazar-i Sharif. And I would feed, I think I fed 4 or 5 nights in a row to the CBS Evening News, just stuff that I was shooting during the day. So it was my first.
This was all new. This was all new to you as well. You were all kind of learning as you went along as well. Not being in country or kind of capturing footage and stuff, but certainly doing that element of it. That was new.
Yeah, the capturing footage was easy. Being in the battle was something that I don't mind it at all. I hate to use the word enjoy it, because I know that we've suffered so much loss, so much loss in Afghanistan. But I enjoy that. But boy, trying to get on the news and they're like, "Okay, you're on in 60 seconds." Oh, I don't know what I'm going to say. Well, you better figure it out. I remember one producer was in my ear from London. She goes, she was trying to say something to me, and I said, "Well, that really wasn't what happened." She kind of think was exasperated, and she goes, "You know what? You better get your act together. You're on at like 10, 9." They sent me those beta tapes at the time afterwards, and I can't watch them. It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I have them on my shelf, but I've never watched.
But they're not on your YouTube.
No.
Okay, that's good.
Come on there. Everybody exposes all their frailties now with the world of social media. But.
Well, yeah. Probably get you a different fan base, maybe a completely different fan base. So let's move on to the first sort of major sort of American operation. Really, was that Operation Anaconda, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Into the Shire Valley Redoubt. So tell me, how did you actually get involved in being part of what was happening?
So that was interesting, and actually came about because of Kalajungi, kind of. As soon as I got back from Kalajungi, because of the news reporting I did and the connections I had at Fort Leavenworth, the School of Advanced Military Studies at Command and General Staff College invited me out to speak and give a couple lectures, multiple university lectures I did. And so I kind of have, I was
connections,
different circles commenting on what I saw. I remember one of the big things at Fort Leavenworth was a closed session. 2 sessions that stuck out in my mind. One was we talked about, oh wait, that was post Anaconda. I'm forgetting because I went back again after post Anaconda as well. But I basically, there was enough interest because of those newscasts and because of the footage we had, that we had some options. We had some options to do something with Discovery Channel. I went out and met with them. It did not work out. But I one day spoke to a Marine Corps public affairs officer down at CFLIC down in Kuwait. And I cannot remember. I think I called him or just called the office, but he had just, according to him, I remember he goes, "This is really good timing. How would you like to come out and get involved in this operation?" Well, unbeknownst to me, and since then I learned that, because we've remained good friends, that he had just been handed the Operation Anaconda information brief, and his job as a public affairs officer was to, we got to tell America's story. This is going to be the first sort of large scale conventional operation. It was going to be a 3 battalions with the QRF, and they were going to be from the 10th Mountain and the 101st. And it was kind of a big deal. The 101st was going to move up from Kandahar Airfield, where they had taken over from the Marines, and 10th Mountain, I believe, was all at Karshakhanabad, and they were coming from K2. So I got this invite. It wasn't much of an invite. They just said, "Hey, how would you like to come out and be in this operation with us?" I was like, "Oh, what is it?" And he's like, "I can't tell you anything. You gotta trust me if you want to come out." And it just felt right. It felt okay. It felt like it was the real deal. It felt like something was going to go on. So I did. I don't think it was more than a couple of weeks later, I jumped on a commercial flight to Kuwait City, and I was you know, he goes, where are you going to stay? And I go, well, I know the one hotel, stay at the Sheraton there. And a couple of days later, within a couple of days, a couple of guys in plain clothes, military officers, but plain clothes, came and picked me up. And that's it. We went out and out the military side of the Kuwait City International Airport. There's the military gate on the backside. Jumped on a C-130. Didn't really still know what we were getting ourselves into. It was kind of fun because the C-130, it was myself, my colleague, and Australian SBS Special Forces Detachment jumped on the bus too. And they were kind of wigged out because we were carrying camera cases, they're special forces. But we reached an agreement within a second. We said, we know the rules. We're not going to film you guys. So we had a long flight with them over to Sib, Oman, and a layover there, and from Sib, Oman into Kandahar. And from Kandahar, we still exactly didn't know what we were doing. We thought we'd be going up to Bagram the next day, but some other guys, the Australians and some other SF elements commandeered the flight. The early parts of the war were just so heavy on the SF element. There was, like I said, the 10th was there, the 101st was there, but I mean, so much SF movement. And so they would come in and they would basically commandeer an airplane. They'd say, yeah, we're on, you're off. And so we were in Kandahar, I think, for a couple of days, and before we were finally able to catch a flight, because there weren't as many flights between Bagram and Kandahar at the time. And it was also, it was end of February, weather permitting over the mountains there. So that's how we got in. And we got into Bagram and met, and I actually was traveling with that same public affairs official from Kuwait City, which I think he really wanted access to the war himself. And so by getting us, he was like, I'm escorting this guy, and we were able to go. Yeah. And that's when
you were his golden ticket to get in.
That's right. We were his ticket in, and he was our ticket in. And we got there, and then we realized, oh, this is a pretty major operation. Seemed like good intelligence, but the enemy's actually going to be there. And that was Operation Anaconda.
And how long were you actually in the field?
Well, I think I was in the field for 3 or 4 days, right from the start. The first day we missed it. I was on there was different groups of helicopters, different serials that were going to go out. The ones that went into the southern blocking positions, they got hit and were under intense fire. So we were on that second wave supposed to come in. So I was late to the party. There was already like 3 or 4 embedded media, one on each helicopter. But we got there a little late because we'd been sitting in Kandahar. So we didn't have a seat. It turned out after those first helicopters, there was like a lag before the next helicopter. So I think it was the next night. It was the day passed, and during the night, we got in that night, like 3 a.m. It's a QRF battalion, Ron Corcoran's battalion from the 101st. And we did a march to contact. So we went in that night, 2 or 3 a.m, dropped into the LZ. It was kind of it was actually more than interesting because we're trying to muster a battalion's worth of men and then march south into the valley where the heavy fighting had gone on all during the day. But at the same time, I remember we were in a pause and I was laying there next to a couple soldiers, a saw gunner. We're peering off into the distance, trying to see if we see anything, or we're going to get attacked, or we're just in the dark. And over flies a helicopter, and I roll over onto my back, and it's a MH-47. You can tell by the long fueling probe. So special forces were right overhead. I'm like, oh, okay. And you just watch. So I actually turned the camera up and filmed some of that. They go right. You see the nice static electricity on the rotor blade, rotor static, really beautiful imagery. And then they went up to this mountain, but I didn't know the name of the mountain. I didn't know what they were doing. That was Talker Gar. That became Roberts Ridge. Those are the helicopters going in, and Neil Roberts was on that helicopter. Chapman was on that next helicopter. But even like an hour later, they came back, and that helicopter came, and I don't know, a few hundred yards over, just kind of did it wasn't a crash landing, but it's kind of like a hard landing, and you could see it through my night vision. I was like, that's unusual. And then sure enough, the group of soldiers I was with was saying, get over and pull security around that helicopter. And then as the story unfolded, we realized that was the helicopter that lost Navy SEAL Roberts, and they did a head count and realized they were a man down. And but we were just ground forces. We didn't, I was with conventional. We went to the next day, and the next day, sporadic fighting, a lot of mortar activity between the Taliban mortar tubes put into the sides of the mountain. I just know this is just a quote. I don't have any, never seen it on paper, but one of the commanders of the 101st, the command staff there said that their intelligence was they had like 6 mortars around the valley. But as we marched in, they identified over 30 mortar tubes firing on U.S. forces. So there's quite a lot of mortars too. And so the next day, you know, it's just like calling in bombing strikes. You could see some Taliban up on the hills, and but there was a few surprising elements. Like I didn't know all the Apache helicopters had been shot down. Nobody had died, but they had taken some severe fire, lost a lot of their systems. And then the next day, I think it was day 3, we're sitting there, and in come these gray Cobras, these Marine Corps Cobras. I'm like, where did the Marine Corps come from? And it's always really funny talking to some really, you know, like private level soldiers that were next to me on the 50 cal. He goes, those aren't Marines. There's no Marines in here. I'm like, that's not an Army Apache. That's a U.S. Marine Corps. And then they were lighting all kinds of things up, and turned out that they were on the Bonhomme Richard off the coast of Kenya. And when the Apaches went down, they were given like sail all night and get up to Bagram. And that's when this detachment of Marine Corps Cobra helicopters came in. So again, you don't know what's going on. I mean, information is really hard to come by in the battlefield because, you know, no one's over the net talking about all this. Hey guys, we've replaced the Army with the Marines. Now they're coming in. I mean, I'm sure obviously the commanders knew, but they weren't passing them down the line. It's like, who cares? You know, your job is to do this, et cetera, et cetera. So I found that after I came back in on, I think, day 4, I was able to get a lot more information as to what the heck was going on, because you just really had a view of your little position. You know, that's it. And so then I was in a day or 2 days, and then I went back out. The whole operation, I think, lasted 12 days. I was out twice. I think I was out twice. By day 4, you know, I'm a camera operator. All my batteries were dead. I mean, I could write in my notebook, but I needed to get in and charge batteries. I was really nervous about the footage I had shot. I wanted to dump the footage. I didn't know what the heck was going on. So,
yeah. Okay, we lost a little bit of that with a poor connection, but that's fine. That's all right. No worry. We'll keep going. So I'll just get you the final question really now, and then we can wrap it up. I mean, from the perspective of, you know, we're coming up to the 20th anniversary now of it all starting. Are you surprised how long it went on?
I don't think if you would have told me back in 2001 or 2 when I was there almost, you know, like 6 months straight, that it would go on for 20 years. But I don't know if I would have even thought to articulate what my response might have been. Afghanistan has been a very difficult place for foreign armies to operate. But I did know in 2002, coming out of Anaconda, had become close to a couple of the special forces guys there, and they were packing up. And I asked them why. And they said, well, you didn't hear from me, but it's the other show. And I said, what's the other show? And the other guy said, you know, we're going to Iraq. And so again, I was out in the field, and all of a sudden in April, I'm hearing like April 2002, I said, we're going to Iraq. And it felt like, again, I didn't know. I wasn't home. I wasn't looking at the news. I mean, people got to remember that, yeah, there's some internet, but it's not like it is now. And I just had really were in like an information vacuum while you're out there. Excuse me. So I think once, and then I went and did the invasion in Iraq, OIF-1. But I think when I realized the scope of that, it felt like I wasn't sure. You know, it's easy hindsight, but I promise you, it's in my journals. I said it in 2002 and 3. I didn't know why we were going to Iraq when Afghanistan wasn't finished, and it's like Iraq could have waited if it needed to happen. So I felt like we pushed all of our resources there. But again, you know, I don't know if that would have made a difference. Would we still be there 20 years? Probably. You know, I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, we've been in Korea since 1950s. Has it helped keep the peace? I think so. I know it's a completely different situation with a completely different set of enemies, set of objectives. And like I say, Afghanistan has not been kind to foreign armies historically. But I'm asking myself this question now, like, you know, when Trump proposed to pull everybody out and started that, is that a good thing? Does it come back to haunt you? Do you just stay for it? But on the other hand, do you stay forever? Because I mean, to affect change in Afghanistan, I do think we need to probably think of it as like the Korean commitment. Don't think about it like, you know, like don't think 20 years. Say we're going to be here 50 years, and let's help.
Go and put commitment there and actually make the change that maybe everybody wants, but also taking into account the kind of government and the country and the culture that they've got as well, rather than trying to impose our culture on them, I guess, as well. So. So that's great, Dodge. Listen, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us. Yeah, really interesting to talk to you as always. I know we've got a poor connection now; it keeps dropping out, but we've got the main bulk of what we wanted to talk about. So again, we can drive people towards your Instagram and to your YouTube channels as well.
Oh yeah, sure, we'd love it. Combat Films, YouTube. We're creeping up there, but the trouble is we put a lot more than just military stuff on there. We go all over the world, so we put all kinds of things. We're actually right now pushing up a lot of that footage from Western China, the Uyghurs that live there in Kashgar and Taskurgan. But yeah. I'm sorry there was a poor connection. I don't know if it was on my end or not.
Just towards the end, we'll be fine. No worries. That'll be great. Listen, okay. I'm looking forward to October. Hopefully we can do a joint event together between the Doc Media Centre and Combat Film and Research. That'd be quite cool.
That would be cool. And it'd be good to get back to Leicester, everybody get their vaccines, and let's just hope that there's no bizarre strains out there that circumvent the vaccine and we'll be able to fly again.
Yeah, absolutely. You take care, my friend. Good to speak to you.
Thank you, John. Take care. See ya.